From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. I'm Nick Barris. It is a Wednesday, and well, I hope you'll join in the conversation this morning because I want your thoughts on exactly what we see happening here in the state of Tennessee, and it's happening in other states across the country to some degree, and that's the question of what type of books our youngsters are exposed to and what they read and how they are approved, and some legislation here in Tennessee that's been passed with regard to setting up textbook panels and how you handle, publications that maybe parents complain about that they feel in some ways are obscene or harmful, whether or not books are actually banned, and then what would be done with those books, and what it means to the larger question of free speech and forum of ideas, and whether or not censorship is kind of the same type of thing as banning a book. We'll get into all of that. Your thoughts on it as well. We'll take your phone calls with our guest, who I think is well suited to be talking about it. Ken Paulson from all over at MTSU is with us, of course, heads up the director there of the Free Speech Center, and has been so involved with this throughout much of your career as a journalist and as an educator. Thanks for joining us this morning, Ken. It's good to see you.
Always a pleasure, Nick.
So let me ask you, just as you sit back and watch what's happening, maybe you give me your take as what you see, where we stand now in Tennessee and elsewhere when it comes to evaluating and deciding, and some of the controversy around, choosing which books youngsters have access to. How do you view, what's happening here?
Well, more than anything else, I feel like I'm in 1957 America again. And if not 1957 America, 1997 America, what is happening now across the country, and particularly in the state of Tennessee, has happened over and over again. It is a cycle that occurs when individuals decide that they are alarmed by some ideas that they don't want our next generation to be aware of. And it's just, if you've seen the movie Footloose, you've lived this before.
Yeah, right.
It is. I always wonder if the people who are pushing censorship today, did they go see movies like Footloose? Did they read Catcher in the Rye? Mm-hmm. Do they remember being young people at all? Because when they were 10 or 12 or 14 or 18, they saw this effort to keep information away from them as being comical. And I think most of us made a silent promise to ourselves that we'll never do that. Mm-hmm. And of course, a certain percentage of people grow up and do exactly that once again. So it's very familiar, it's very predictable, and it's troubling.
What do you think it's really all about? Because I wonder, you talk about maybe parents complaining about something, or they're talking about a publication or a book, and I'm a parent, and I find it laughable that I think any book my son might come into contact with being harmful to him, especially in these day and age where parents are going to complain about some textbook, and their kids are going to come home that night and play video games with violence that's just off the charts. I mean, it's what is it really all about? Is it about maybe, are politics involved here?
Yeah, politics are very involved here. Honestly, when I look at this kind of legislation, you have to ask, are the people who sponsor it just really poorly informed and think they're doing something good? And I'll explain why I say really poorly informed, because so much of this has been resolved by the courts already. There's no problem. It's been taken care of. But secondly, or are they just cynical, and they're going to, in every aspect of life that they can control, they're going to try to limit ideas that make them uncomfortable. I suspect it's a combination of the two, because I'm certain there are some legislators who are supporting this kind of legislation, who think they're doing God's work, who think they're doing good work, and feel really proud of the work they do, and can't imagine why the rest of us would not be on board with their personal crusade. The reason I say, so let's step back and talk a little bit about the legislation itself. So fundamentally, the the latest round bans obscene books in school libraries, and enforces it in one case with a textbook commission, and tries to limit what kids would have access to.
Right.
First of all, what a stunning insult to teachers and librarians everywhere.
Right.
In my life, these have been some of the best influences. Overwhelmingly, teachers and librarians care about when young people learn. They are passionate about making sure the right information gets to kids. And on top of that they read. This is something that's critically important. And instead, they are called pornographers. It's insane. It is rude. It is unprofessional. And it brings to mind that some of these same folks who are calling librarians pornographers get enraged when people question police officers and their conduct. How dare you? They're here to protect us. Well, how dare you? Librarians and teachers are there to educate us and our children. They are an amazing asset to society, and they should be respected and protected. So that's part one. But the rest of this is everything is taken care of. There is a U.S. Supreme Court case in 1982 called Board of Education versus PICO that established every procedure you need for taking a book out of the library. It explains all the issues, and it provides a mechanism for doing that. This legislation means nothing. It's unnecessary. Why would you pass laws to duplicate what the U.S. Supreme Court has already put in place, unless you are looking for personal glory or political advantage? Nick, the problem in all these debates is people who don't look too deeply will say, well, that's not an unreasonable law. I think we should keep dirty books out of the hands of,
right.
of students. But it's a bait and switch. It's just a political theater. Of course, no one thinks a 7-year-old should be taught about transgenderism. But this stuff is largely not happening at all and can be addressed with existing mechanisms. The idea that we need one more state law to do these things is insane. We don't need more government in our life when the existing principles are there. And in this case, PICO established very clearly that school boards can remove books from classrooms and from school libraries. And there's just a series of criteria they need to consider when they do it. We're done. It's over. It's fixed. Why in the world does any legislator feel they need to conduct hearings to bring in celebrities and concerned parents to discuss something that is resolved? And yet they march ahead with legislation as though their goal is to control every aspect of our lives. That's not freedom in Tennessee.
Right. And you're right. I think all of us, agree, just as you said, that there are certain things that children should not have access to. And when you talk about pornography, okay, you don't want truly pornographic material available to them. What concerns me is that you have like Art Spiegelman's Pulitzer Prize winning book Mouse that one of the counties here has decided to ban, and then you've got Ruby Bridges Goes to School, the story of the first black child to integrate New Orleans schools. Things like this all of a sudden, and I don't know. It seems like they're trying to lump that kind of stuff in with when we're talking about pornography. Like, for instance, just a very blatant case, you would not have a copy of Playboy magazine or something like that in a school library. I think all of us can agree it would not belong there. But to ban Spiegelman's work, that's where I think a lot of people get really disturbed. And frankly, when that story broke, I think a lot of us here in Tennessee were embarrassed for the state because the rest of the country was looking at it going, what?
Yeah, let's ban a Pulitzer Prize winning book about the Holocaust. Nick, the cynical thing about all this is there is not a copy of Playboy in any public or private high school in America. These instead are thought-provoking books that cover topics that involve life, some gender differences in the high school level, certainly profane language, but you want to keep your 12-year-old away from profane language. Well, first of all, keep them away from other 12-year-olds then.
Right.
I mean, think about our child. I mean, to me, so much of this, I somehow lose touch with who we were when we were 10 or 12 or 14. We were curious. We would read, we would read comic books, and we'd trade baseball cards. We were not looking for Catcher in the Rye. And unless somebody signed it, it was unlikely we were going to read it. But if we did come across it, the kid who reads that book benefits from that book. I mean, that kid has an insatiable curiosity, wants to know about the world. It's a good thing. So yeah, these books are extraordinary. And I want to remind folks that this is not about textbooks. The Board of Education can at any time decide this textbook is not appropriate. And you've seen this now.
Sure.
The state of Florida trying to ban a bunch of math books. So this is a school library. And once again, that is typically a supplement to one's education. So a kid is not being ordered to read Maus. In order to seek out Maus in the library, the kid would have to have heard about it, would have an interest in the Holocaust, might be drawn to it because it's a Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel. And that's a kid who will only benefit from this. It is a school library. Ask yourselves, listeners at home, viewers at home, do you remember spending hour upon hour in the school library? Of course you don't. You might end up in there when recess was rained out, but it was always supplemental. It was always in addition to your education. So the kids who seek that out are kids who can handle the material, and no one's being forced to read that stuff.
Listen, the irony in all this, as you just said, many of them may have never heard of Maus until all of a sudden a band comes along. And as we all saw when that happened, it shot to the top of some of the bestseller lists. So it kind of backfires on those because it draws attention. And I can tell you as a kid, I see a books band, I want to read it. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back, continue our conversation about this with Ken Paulson. We'll be taking some of your phone calls as well. Tom, Ann, and others, if you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to you right after this.